What's up, everybody? Big Swede coming at you once again from Swede Studios. So I figured it was time to finally give you guys a studio update tour. If you remember, about a year ago, we were making some big changes in the studio, and I put out a video and kind of walked you through what my current setup was at the time before we made any changes. I talked a little bit about the direction we're going to move into, and then I also promised you guys a follow-up video. I said once the new gear was in place and everything was set up, I was going to kind of walk you through it and give you a tour of Swede Studios 2.0. Obviously, that never happened. The reason why is I wanted to wait to do the video until I was 100% comfortable with the setup and how I wanted things to be. And I honestly just never really got to that point with the new setup. I was constantly tinkering with things, changing routing, moving things around, and I never got 100% set on this is how I'm going to run things. That leads us to, today. Fast forward, almost a year, like I said, and I'm making another huge change. A lot of that having to do with the changes we made when we moved to Swede Studios 2.0. So you could consider this, I guess, Swede Studios 3.0. And now that I'm, set up the way I want, obviously there's some gear that I would like to add in the future. But as far as, my recording setup as it is, it's set up the way I want. Everything's working. And I'm going to give you a quick tour and show you the changes we made going from 1 to 2, and then also now 2 to 3. So let's go check it out. All right, so this is the major change we're talking about, both from 1 to 2 and now from 2 to 3. We added this, and as you can see, it's boxed up and it's going away. So we had originally gone from the Focusrite 18i20 as my audio interface, and I moved to this. I'm a tactile kind of guy. I like the feel of physical knobs and faders and buttons and stuff, and I was really missing that with mixing solely in the box. So I thought this was going to be a great solution. It gives me those physical components, and it also gave me more inputs, 32 inputs. I thought it was going to be a great solution, but as it turns out, it's honestly overkill for what I'm doing. This thing, let's be honest, was designed as a live sound mixer. It can also function as an audio interface. It can work in a studio, but it really is way more than what I need, and it had a hefty price tag on it as well, so selling this allows me to get into some other gear a little bit easier. So let me show you what we've moved into now. All right, before we get into the new setup, anybody that's familiar with my desk from like Instagram pictures and stuff like that, you may notice that the Line 6 Helix is gone. I have sold that as well. I just found myself not really using it anymore. All of my amp sim stuff is now done in the computer with plugins, and I'm also getting back into actual real physical amps again. So I just didn't have a need for the Helix anymore. It was taking up rack space. So I figured might as well sell it and use those funds to get some things that I am going to use. Now, as far as the audio interface, as you can see, we've moved back to the Focusrite 18i20. That's right, we're pretty much back where we started from with that. I have added some stuff to give me additional inputs and outputs, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But as far as the audio interface, yep, we're back to the 18i20. All right, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the desk and how things are flowing as far as signal path goes. I'm not going to go super in-depth in how everything's routed. If you guys are really interested in that, hit me up in the comments and I'll definitely put something together. But for now, just a quick and dirty rundown of how everything's running through the computer. All right, starting behind the desk here, we have this 16 input XLR patch bay, and this is just where any microphones, XLR cables are going to get plugged into to start passing audio into the system. All right, next up we have our patch bays here. These are Samson S-Patch plus 48-point patch bays. I'm not going to go into all the details of how everything's routed in here. If you guys are interested in that, I can definitely do a separate video on it. But simply put, the patch bays are how all the audio gets routed to the different pieces of gear in the system simply and easily. So, rather than having to go underneath the desk and plug things in and unplug them every time I want to move the signal chain, I can simply grab a patch cable and plug into the correct port, and it's going to send that audio there very simply and easily. All right, so the way I have my patch bay set up here, the top patch bay is handling all of my ins and outs. So everything coming from that XLR panel in the back comes into here. That gets sent over to the 18920 and the Octopre, which are handling my 16 analog inputs. The outputs of these also come back to that same patch bay on the top. The lower patch bay is where all of my other analog gear is hooked into. So, if I want to add a piece of gear in, I just need to grab a patch cable and plug in the appropriate connections, and that component is now in the signal chain. All right, moving down, we have the Warm Audio WA273, which is a 2-channel mic preamp. It's based off of a Neve 1073. I love this preamp. I love the way it sounds. I use it on all my vocals. You can plug instruments in, so you can DI, guitar, bass, whatever. But yeah, I just love the way this thing sounds. It just gives so much character to the things you're recording. Much more so than if you were to plug directly into the preamps on the Focusrite stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with the Focusrite preamps. They're just they're very sterile, I guess you could say, but they're really clean and clear. But they just don't add anything to the sound. Like, that's the beauty of outboard gear, is it just gives you like a vibe or some character and adds a little bit of sauce to the sound. I do have plans to add some more preamps. Maybe another one of these, maybe some different ones. But that's eventually what's going to go in this spot here. All right, next we have the Empirical Labs EL8 Distressor. I love this thing. Amazing. I use it on all my vocals, some other stuff here and there. I always tell people that, if you're getting into outboard gear and you want to get a compressor and you can only really afford one piece of gear right now, get this thing right here, because this is like the Swiss Army knife of compressors. It can do it all really well. Nothing sounds bad through it. Are there other compressors that do a specific thing a little bit better than this? Yeah, probably. But this thing does a lot of different stuff really well. And like I said, nothing sounds bad through it. I run all my vocals through this thing. Love it. Love it. All right, the latest bit of analog gear we got is this Warm Audio bus comp. This is based off of the SSL bus compressor that you would find in like the master section of an SSL analog console. I've been running a software version of that on my mix bus for forever. I just love the way it kind of glues everything together at the end. But being a lover of analog gear, I wanted to get an analog version of it. And man, this Warm Audio stuff, for the money, man, they make really great quality stuff. But yeah, again, it just does something. It's hard to quantify exactly what it is. It's very similar to what the software emulation does, but it just adds that little bit of sauce, little bit of character that it just imparts on the audio. But yeah, really glues everything together at the end on the mix bus. All right, now, after having that beautiful mixer with 33 touch-sensitive motorized faders, I couldn't really go back to, moving faders inside of the computer with a mouse, so I had to go with the next best thing. Here we have the PreSonus Fader Port 16. Now, this is just a control surface. There's no audio running through this whatsoever. This is just a controller for the DAW software. And I am running Studio One now. I had mentioned in the previous video that I was running Reaper at the time, but I was going to try out some new software in conjunction with that mixer. Since it's made by PreSonus, there's really tight integration with the DAW control. Now, this fader port is also made by PreSonus, so again, you have that tight integration between the software and the hardware. Now, this can control other DAWs, but just because they're both made by PreSonus, there's really, really tight integration. So as I move these faders here, the corresponding faders in the software will move. Also, lots of other functionality. I can control my plugins through here as well, so a lot less time spent clicking on the mouse and a lot more time with hands on the board, and I love that. All right, for my monitoring situation, I'm still running these Yamaha HS5s as my main studio monitors. I do have this smaller set of M Audio speakers. I forget the model number, but I can A/B between those and the HS5s if I want to hear how something sounds through a different set of speakers. But for the most part, the HS5s are doing the heavy lifting on a day-to-day basis. All right, for headphones, if I'm doing any mixing on the headphones or if I'm doing recording that doesn't necessarily need any kind of sound isolation, I have these Beyerdynamic DT990 Pros. Really, really good headphones. Very comfortable, sound great. A little pricey, but not too bad. But they are open back headphones. So if you're doing any kind of live mic recording, you might get bleed into the microphone from like a click track or backing track. So in those instances here, I have a little bit cheaper set of headphones, these Audio-Technica ATH M30Xs. Like I said, a little bit cheaper, but they are closed back and good at isolating that sound to prevent any kind of bleed into the microphones. All right, just a couple more pieces of miscellaneous gear. We have the Cloud Lifter, which is basically providing a clean boost for a microphone, in this case the Shure SM7B here. A notoriously quiet microphone. Now, depending on the preamp you're running, you may or may not need one of these. Matter of fact, this WA273 here actually has plenty of gain in itself to run that microphone by itself. I tend to run the Cloud Lifter anyway, just so I don't have to push the preamp as hard. But depending on the situation and the sound you're going for, the more you push that preamp, the more color you're going to get in the sound. So depending on the sound you're going for, you might want to push that preamp and forego the Cloud Lifter. Down over here, we have our Radial Pro DI DI box. That's what I'm using when I'm plugging in my guitar or bass and running audio into the system. And then down here, we have basically the audio workstation computer. Built it in a 4U rack. I actually have a video on that if you want to check it out. I'll put a link in the description below, the build on that. But everything's contained in this rack unit. I have some more rack space down there if I ever need it. Right now we just got a crybaby wah sitting in there. But there you go. Sweet Studios 3.0. All right, guys, so there you go, the new studio setup. As I said during the video, if you have any kind of specific questions on how I have things set up, routing, whatever the case may be, hit me up in the comments below. I'll do my best to get you some answers. If there's enough interest, maybe I'll do some more in-depth videos as far as like the patch bay routing, whatever the case is, whatever your questions are, let me know and I'll do my best to get you some answers. That's all we got for this one. Stay tuned to the channel though. We have part 3 of the Harley Benton project coming up where we're taking a really cheap guitar, putting some good quality components into it to try and transform it into a good, solid playing guitar. So stay tuned for that, and we'll catch you next time.